Welcome to AirSeal Technology. I'm Zeke and I'm your host. One of the first things we must do when going to a work site is protect the customer's belongings from damage, dust, or destruction. Next, we pull the floorboard and find out what's underneath. The work scope should provide us with the proper square footage and coverage for the job and materials needed. Next, we dam the chimney off, protecting it from any insulation that could go down in between the chimney itself and the floors below, therefore avoiding a health and safety issue in the future. To gain access to the knee wall floor, we had to cut the sheetrock out, cut the knee wall floor to gain access to the cavity. In the open attic area, we began to insert the tube into the floor cavity and use the dense packing tube method. When dense packing the flooring area, you must be sure to dense pack on both sides of the cavity. It's not unusual to get blowback from a cavity that is being filled with insulation. In order to ensure the quality of the dense pack, the insulation machine should be calibrated every 6 months to assure that it meets the standard. The tubing technique is designed to allow the installer to install 3.5 pounds of insulation per square foot if the technique is done correctly. In order to ensure the quality of the dense pack, it is recommended that you install the tube the full length of the cavity to ensure that you dense pack from one end of the cavity to the other. Using a back and forth motion will ensure that the cavity is packed from front to back. The installer is now preparing to separate the unconditioned floor cavity from the conditioned floor cavity with a 1-inch piece of foam board. The installer will trim the piece to fit. The foam board must fit tight and snug. This process will be repeated throughout the entire knee wall on both sides. Paying attention to details like this will give you quality results. Once the foam board is fitted, it must then be foamed into place. The foam acts as an air sealant as well as an anchor once the foam has been cured. This will ensure that the foam board doesn't move when we begin to dense pack the knee wall. Once all the prepping is done, we can begin the dense packing process. The 2.5 feet long cavities in this knee wall don't take long to dense pack. Once the knee walls are dense packed, the netting process can begin. Once the netting has been anchored on one end, it is then pulled tight and stapled. All 4 sides must be stapled tightly with staples 1 inch apart. This process must be repeated the entire length of the knee wall. Due to the fact that we removed the only pressure boundary existing in the knee wall, which was the sheetrock, we must now install a backside pressure boundary as well as a front side pressure boundary. Pressure boundaries are designed to hold insulation into place. Another option to this task would have been to install a backside pressure boundary and reinstall the sheetrock. We chose to net both sides of the cavity in order to avoid having to drill, fill, and finish sheetrock. Finishing both sides of the knee wall with the netting and then installing the sheetrock gives a more professional look. During the netting process, you must periodically test the tension of the netting to ensure that it can hold the insulation that's going to be installed. Once the backside netting is completed, we move on to the front side netting. The netting should be neat and trimmed in order to facilitate the sheetrock install. Once the netting has been completely installed, we can begin the installation process. You will need to install the staples approximately 1 inch apart or less throughout the entire framing on both sides of the framed wall. This will assure that the netting will stay tight during the installation process. We are now ready to begin to fill the cavity. You can begin to see the insulation fill the cavity. The installer must use sight, sound, and feel to determine the insulation's density in the cavity. You can hear the pressure-packed insulation entering the cavity. The installer must move the nozzle head in various directions in order to fill the cavity evenly. When doing the install, not only can you hear the insulation entering the cavity, but you can also feel it as well. Let's keep in mind, we must keep this flush with the beams in order to reinstall the sheetrock without any problems. Once the cavity is full, we can move on to the next cavity. The finished project should look uniform and neat. If this process is done well, you should be able to feel the results immediately. You should notice a reduction in sound and air infiltration. The insulation should be firm to the touch. This small 3x3 corner sticks into the unconditioned area and must be addressed. We net the corner loosely. We would like to fill the cavity with about 4 inches of insulation. We must insulate this corner with the same density that we insulated the knee wall netted area. Consistent density is very important. Pressure will always find the weakest point to infiltrate. The corner is now ready to be insulated. Once the corner has been dense packed, the floor is completed. The job is on the final stages of completion. The final walkthrough of this job included floor reinstall, cleanup, chimney damming, as well as state final inspection. For more training on how to do insulation right, please visit our website at www.airsealtechnology.com.